Well, I think the move to participatory culture has been building over the last 2 to 3 decades. We've seen just, well before we had the internet, people were using Xerox machines to produce zines and distribute them among themselves. That science fiction fandom had spread outward from being a really small cadre of technological-oriented people to encompassing more and more of the population. I think we saw the underground press in the 1960s as an experiment with this, and People's Radio, which turned into talk radio, opened up a space for participation. So by the time the internet came along, the public was ready and eager for channels that would allow them to communicate with each other, to tell stories over a distance, to share knowledge with each other. There's just been an explosion of creativity since we've had that. And so the growing availability of low-cost tools put in the hands of everyday people to create media and to share media is sort of fed an existing desire to participate that's been building over an extended period of time. Well, I think the history of this would start with Star Trek and go to Star Wars and then branch out to the Matrix and just keep on going through Harry Potter. I mean, those are all landmark texts which in one way or another solicited very active participation of audiences. People were taking Super 8 cameras and making their own movies. And when the internet came along, they were spreading them through, media channels. When YouTube came along, that became a platform for that. People were writing their own stories about Star Trek and Star Wars and Harry Potter and distributing them via the web, and become more and more large networks of hundreds of thousands of stories in circulation created by everyday people. People began to organize discussion lists to talk about what was cryptic about the Matrix. And sorting through those puzzles together, they learned how to collaborate and form complex knowledge communities online. Well, I think we live in a moment of what I call convergence culture. And a convergence culture is one where every story, every sound, every image, every relationship plays itself out across the maximum number of media platforms. And that process is shaped as much by decisions made in teenagers' bedrooms as by decisions made in corporate boardrooms. Right? So what we're seeing is a desire of consumers to have the media they want, where they want it, when they want it, meet the desire of the industry to maximize touch points, to broaden, to sort of exploit synergies across media platforms. So those two things have come together to create a very complex media landscape. Now what it means is as fans seek out information, they will of course visit official sites, and media producers have begun to move toward what I call transmedia storytelling, which is to take a story that might exist only in a film and extend it into other platforms, extend it into comics, extend it into the web, extend it into games. Not just replicate it, not just translate it, but to tell new pieces of information that add to the experience, to refocalize it around secondary characters who we might just exist briefly on screen, but might become the dominant character of a game. To take a slice of the world and play it out on the web in a way that it entices the attention and interest of fans. And fans just carry that process a few steps further, writing original stories, making their own videos, reappropriating that material, and to extend the storytelling. So if something excites their imagination, a little detail that some fan gets fascinated on, they may elaborate it themselves online, and that may entertain and engage other fans, and in turn keep them engaged in the media property. People have hungered for stories across thousands and thousands of years. As far back as we know, people have told stories to each other. Oral storytelling survives to the present day despite the rise of print. Print survives to the present day despite the rise of broadcast media. Broadcast media didn't kill off cinema. Every step along the way, the transformation occurs. But there are, in fact, no dead media, understood broadly. There are dead delivery technologies. So once we have something like recorded sound, it's going to stay in our culture, but it might have once been a wax cylinder and now an MP3 file. But what a recorded sound is, that we listen to music and spoken words from other people, that's remained surprisingly stable. So I think cinema will outlast the internet, will survive well into the internet era. There's no reason to think it's endangered, but its functions, its visibility, how it tells stories may change radically. And the biggest push, I think, has been toward moving from self-contained media platforms to what I call convergence culture, that is the spread of stories across many media platforms in a more coordinated way. And I think that's the shift. Not does one media kill off another, but how do the new media interact with the old? What's the new relationships that get established between all the communication technologies within a culture? I think we're seeing increasingly a blurring of that line, where in fact producers are often fans first and become invested in a franchise. So if you look at something like Doctor Who in the UK, the groups that have taken over Doctor Who were all fans who were deeply invested in the series before and got their starts through fan activity. If we look at the other direction, we're seeing increasing collaboration between producers and fans. So Star Trek fans are making videos that are for the web, which are keeping alive the Star Trek franchise in preparation for the release of the new film. And the studios are loaning them the talents of actors, they're loaning them props, they're working with established screenwriters. So they even call that a fan film. Is sort of blurry. It's partially fan-made, partially made by the production company. That's, that we're seeing more and more official contests to support fan cinema or fan fiction sponsored by production companies. And some of those can become seeds for new ideas that feed back into the creative process. So if you expand the potential range of creators in your society, you're going to unleash a very different kind of storytelling system than if we make it a narrow, specialized, professionalized sort of mode of work in which only a small number of people tell stories, the rest of us consume. So I think those lines are completely breaking down at the present time. And I think what we're seeing at the moment is a push-pull over what it means to break those down. That is intellectual property struggles over how far do you permit people to go with your creative work? How much participation is good, and at what point does it become damaging to the media franchise and the interest of media producers? How far can fans trust producers given there's a history of cease and desist letters and hostility? At what point do they feel that their ideas have been ripped out of their hands and turned into something quite different from what they intended? That's the set of negotiations we're seeing playing themselves out right now. And I think those negotiations will determine the future of storytelling. Well, I think right now what we're seeing is transmedia storytelling is predominantly cropped up around a couple of audiences. Children, if we look at Pokemon or we look at any children's franchise today, across genres, there is a growing interest in extending the story into as many platforms and as many opportunities for participation as possible. If we look at the sort of nerd geek audience that circulates around science fiction, fantasy, again we see that explosion of experimentation and interest. So on television, it's Heroes, it's Lost. In cinema, it's The Matrix, it's Batman. These are sort of franchises that appeal to that population. The tipping point will come when it starts to expand outward from that. The potential is certainly there for, say, historical drama to give us a very rich transmedia experience. For mystery to give us an experience where we trace clues across many different media. Even for romance to give us an experience of seeing the story through different subjectivities, the male story, the female story as the couple are formed together. The potential is enormous. The question is how far can you go down that route and how fast? Because some audiences have more disposable time, more disposable income, a greater willingness to plunge into a transmedia story. Many audiences don't know what to do with it. They are not trained to think across media platforms. And so you've got to take them step by step and educate them. In the short term, what you've got to do is tell a story that's well contained in each of the medium, but that you add new layers as you consume it across other media platforms, so that you can watch a television show or the movie, not be confused by any holes or gaps, but that you see different things and you understand the story in a richer level if you consume the comic books or play the games or read about it on the web. That's the transition we're at, and storytellers and audiences both are learning how to do that. So I don't think it's just rooted in science fiction in the long run, but I think so far we've seen the greatest development of it in science fiction in the short term. I think there's a strong connection. I mean, first of all, I think Obama may have been the first candidate to really conceive himself not as a television candidate or a web candidate, but as a transmedia candidate. That is, the Obama campaign understood that his story would be told across many different media platforms, that the public would want to engage with it and feel a sense of ownership over it, would want to participate in the campaign through many different media platforms. So whether it's advertising in video games or using Twitter to reach the voters, if it's allowing people to appropriate your image and transmit it through YouTube or appearing on late night comedy shows. The Obama campaign was everywhere media was being produced. And they were able to capitalize on that and spread their message quite effectively across those platforms. They were running up against a candidate who never used the internet, candidates who were uncertain how to respond to Saturday Night Live, how to respond to Colbert and Daily Show, uncertain about YouTube, and so it was a battle between an old paradigm of how you run a campaign and a new one. And the Obama campaign was decisive in demonstrating in this new era, stories have to spread across all platforms, and candidates have to be available to voters through every platform and have to be willing to allow voters to be much more active participants in shaping the messages of the campaign than ever before. Well, I think for a long time we talked about personalized media, and I think we've discovered in a network society that it's really a socialized media, a communal media. We use our tools to connect with other people. That insofar as their social ties have broken down, it's been factors other than media that have done it. I mean, Alvin Toffler in the 1960s